What is happening right now, at least in go-to-market and specifically in sales, is crazier than I've ever imagined was possible.
Asad is the CEO of a premium sales talent sourcing agency, and he can't believe what he's seeing.
The interesting thing is that the standard deviation is way higher this year, meaning that the winners are going to be winning more.
Of course, AJ is the CEO of QuotaPath, and he has hard data on sales compensation across more than 1,400 companies. So he's able to bring context on some of the wild trends we're seeing in go-to-market teams today.
Enterprise account executives now get paid $200,000 salaries, $200,000 variable comp plans, up to an equity at sign-on.
And this might all sound like a boom, but it's far more complicated than that. So in today's episode, who's losing to make room for all these winners, what this market means for your sales team, and where sales salaries are headed next. Welcome to Top Line. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. I'm the CEO Pavilion. I'm joined by my incredible co-hosts, two amazing men, Asad Zaman, the CEO of Sales Talent Agency, and AJ Bruno, the CEO of QuotaPath, the leader in incentive compensation management, with their new agentic companion atlas that can answer any question for you, build any comp plan, do anything you need, all in a matter of seconds. This is the new QuotaPath. This is the future of go-to-market.
Is AJ paying us something for this?
That was really, really good. That was off the top of your head, Sam. I am super impressed.
Of my head. Listen, I'm here to support you. I am a shareholder. I am, a small little share, Asad, the bigger shareholder.
Well, the big news is Asad and I are going to be speaking at GTM all on benchmarking and data. That's for gold, right? We're doing it for Pavilion Gold only.
And then the day before that, we're going to do live top line recording either at the Glass House or we're going to find a podcast studio, and we can grab a bunch of amazing people and start testing what it would be like to all.
And Asad will be alive in the flesh, right? He's a real human being, so he'll
even
be
Neil
there.
Is coming.
If it's an event designed to promote Asad's brand, I think he will actually be there. Unlike my wedding, which had no.
Ego gets him there.
You unlocked the key to Asad showing up.
So do things that feed the ego. We have a fun episode today. We don't have a guest after some time. And so we are going to be talking about 3 different topics. Each of us have a topic, and we're going to share some data, share some insights, and then chit-chat. And I want to start with the talent market. I've been dying to talk to you guys about this because it's absolutely crazy. So let me share some data. So right now, if you look back to when ZERP happened, hiring was really hard, right? Like we all had felt it. We'd spoken about it. We'd looked at a bunch of the data. It was really hard. The market was hot. Companies were growing aggressively. They were raising money very easily, investing that in growth. Growth required people. The demand for people was skyrocketing. And because people are a thing that you can't increase the supply of very easily in the short term, you saw downstream implications like compensation going up, offer acceptance going down, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the wildest market we'd ever seen. This is multiples beyond that. What is happening right now, at least in go-to-market and specifically in sales, is crazier than I've ever imagined was possible. So I was feeling it for some time where it felt like hiring account executives, especially at the mid-market and enterprise level, felt impossible for some companies and just absolutely crazy. And so we started digging into trying to figure out like what's actually happening here. Theoretically, it made sense. We're year 3 of this AI build out. Last year, about a year and a half ago, a number of companies hit escape velocity and they started hiring lots of people. The other part of this that's interesting is now a lot of these companies are in office and are in specific cities. San Francisco is the number 1 hub for AI companies. New York is number 2. I think between the two of them, there's 50 or 60% of all venture dollars into AI companies are in these 2 cities. And so they're doing a lot of their hiring over there. And so if all these companies are there in these finite talent pools, then what's probably happening is that those talent pools are getting depleted. So we went and looked into this. In New York and San Francisco, if you combine them, people that are in sales that work in software at companies that would be considered startups or growth stage companies, so up till 500 employees, there's 38,000 of them. In the last 2 years, half of them have taken a new job. In the last 12 months, 25% of them have taken a new job. If you click in, now this is not the biggest numbers, you actually can click in and see, okay, what's left here? And what is left are, if you start filtering for tenure, so people that are very jumpy, if you take them out, you're left with almost nothing. And so San Francisco and New York really are extremely saturated from a talent market perspective, which is now leading to a few things. Compensation has skyrocketed. Enterprise account executives now get paid $200,000 salaries, $200,000 variable comp plans, up to $500,000 in equity at sign-on. That used to be $150,000 to $175,000 at the top end, just like a year and a bit ago. So it's moved significantly. Offer acceptance is down. So 45% offer acceptance if you're like a top AI company. Top. And AJ shared some interesting data. I think he has more on this as well. But quota attainment seems to be going up. And what does that mean? Number one thing that matters for salespeople is compensation. So if they're making good money, they're probably not likely to want to move again, right? I have a good job, so I don't want to move. And so now when you look at where we are in AI, you've got all these AI companies that there's more of them is hitting escape velocity, and the ones that did are growing even faster. And so they need to hire more and more. Where are they going to find people? And I think this hiring problem is going to become a real significant blocker for people. And we'll see crazy and crazier things. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if enterprise AE comp gets to $250,000 as a salary and $250,000 as a variable very soon. So that's the talent market. That is what is happening right now. But
what the first thing that comes to mind is like the talent market for engineers in 21 and 22. Like a lot of the stats that you're citing, Asad, seem very ZERP days for engineers where we were just fighting over it. And then, I mean, this is still true for probably AI engineers, but you never hear about that for sales. And especially when we're talking about a market that's supposedly really challenging for talent more generally, it's fascinating. I think that the one that I would love to double click into, and I don't know if you have more detail on this, is the 45% acceptance rate of like is that frontier model companies that are trying to hire sales talent?
Yeah,
is that
if you're
what that is?
I would say if you're the tier one application layer, that's what you're wrestling with right now.
Is this like Google and Apple fighting over engineers back in like the early 2000s and like having cease and desist? Is that where we think
it's
like
pretty aggressive right now? Like there's a lot of conversations where I'm having with companies where founders are like, I went from like 1 million to 30 million in a year. Like, why is it hard for me to hire? Like, what's harder than this? And then there's companies that have gone from like 2 million to 100 million in like 2 years. And they're like, I thought I'd be able to attract people. They don't even want to talk to us right now. And
where are they trying to recruit from? Like
the thing about mid-market and enterprises, you kind of need people that have certain like relevant experience. So they have to have worked at companies that are at that stage in their journey, because sales at an enterprise level company is very different to at a growth stage or a startup company. Sales as a craft is just different when you have a brand behind you versus when you don't, when you have infrastructure built out versus when you don't. And so they need to hire from this like limited talent pool of people that have done similar jobs in and around that stage of business. Similar jobs could be, you could hire a mid-market person into enterprise. You could hire an enterprise person into a strategic role. But you're not going to be that much more flexible than that.
I think it's exciting. This is great, in my opinion. Quota attainment's up. We talk about bubbles. The point of a bubble is that asset valuation is disconnected from economic reality, right? Basically. Maybe you make the argument somewhere structurally, well, this is different because they're financing these data center build-outs. Like the compute CapEx investment is a debt finance thing, and therefore it's not as on stable ground as it would be if Google and all these big companies were financing it from cash flows. That's the way we would know it was really real. But putting that aside, all of this gives me a lot of optimism. You know, there's all these reports that AI is supposed to be taking all our jobs, and of course we have Amanda on all the time talking about superhumans and the role that they can play in sales. And I'm sure they can play a huge role in sales. I'm very sure of that. But at the same time, it's fantastic to see that there's demand for great talent. The It's not directly related, and it's not my main tidbit, but my main tidbit isn't really a fact-based tidbit. It's really just a conversation about a debate
Yeah,
on X.
cultural moment.
Right, exactly. But let me read you this because it's related. There's just all this fear about AI replacing salespeople, AI replacing go-to-market leaders, AI replacing all of our jobs. Employment, since the launch of ChatGPT, the Philippines offshore industry, 8% of the country's GDP, has grown much bigger. Employment in IT and business outsourcing is up 20% to 1.9 million workers, and industry revenue is up 30% to 42 billion.
Yep.
AI is helping offshore workers in the Philippines do new, more complex jobs. They're picking up work training AI models or supervising AI agents. Hospitals in America are increasingly outsourcing the checking of insurance eligibility and filing of medical records to Filipinos packing AI tools. I just think, it's Jevons paradox. It is what happens with every new piece of technology. Everybody thinks the technology is going to wipe everybody out, and instead the economy adapts. And I think it's really exciting. So I don't think those things are directly related, but I
But
think what
in a way, like it is connected because there's this conversation around how companies will need less of each person, right? They need less salespeople, less engineers, less all of this. And you could argue that these companies are much leaner than similar sized companies from a revenue perspective than before, but they still can't keep up with their hiring demand, which is exactly what used to happen before. And so the person might be more productive, but that doesn't mean that you are now like, people is not my main problem. People is very much the main problem, like for these
100%.
organizations.
And all of the doomers misunderstand that markets want to grow, companies want to grow. Nobody wants to just pocket
Yeah.
all of their profit or pocket all of their cash flow. They want to reinvest because they feel like this is a land grab, and we have to gain as much market share as we can. So
There's
I'm really
almost like
encouraged by
now
it.
you hear the people that are like, profit is stupid. It means you have nothing better to invest into. There's a little bit of that going on Twitter these days, which
That
is
is what
always
Vinod
hilarious.
was saying. A lot of people flamed him on X they thought they were being clever by saying that Vinod's confusing profitability and cash flow, and their point is that there's non-cash expenses, there's ways of making profits seem artificially high or artificially low, but you might still be generating cash flow, which
Yep.
is a very technical argument. It's not really his point. The fundamental point is true that if you have a better use for the capital, you tend to invest it in that better use. If you don't have a better use, then you pay a dividend or let it flow out in the form of profits. So
That was the
Vinod was
Peter Thiel thing, right? He used to say Google is not spending its money. It's just sitting on all this cash. It has nothing to spend on. Now they're spending it in the market's
right,
like,
exactly.
maybe you're
Now
spending
they're
too much
spending
of
it.
it.
Well, it's also like Amazon. I think about AWS, where like back in 2014, 15, Walmart and other companies were going on and saying, what is Amazon even trying to do? Little did they know they had a thing that was spitting off so much cash flow to their main business. They could pull down the prices of all of their products to compete at that level, and no one even knew it. So you're able to, like, in this world, especially at the public markets, you're able to hide those things in different business units, and people don't even know uh, what you're actually spending on and how you're doing it. I think your main point, Sam, is right in the sense that it's like what we're seeing is that a lot of companies were quick to say, okay, we're going to cut X% and we're going to say it's AI, but then you actually have to pick something up. Like, you lost all this. So you're like, well, we got to actually outsource this and find the right people to be able to do this job or job to be done. And if the Philippines or whomever are saying, you know what, this is a golden opportunity for us to increase our margins even further, even though they were low to begin with because the cost of salaries wasn't so high, they're going to take advantage of it, which
The
is
margins,
awesome to see.
I think you have to remember the cost of life and everything in the Philippines is very low. So these people were like hyper profitable for their markets. Like my cousin runs an IT development company in Pakistan. He has like a couple of hundred employees. Pfizer is a customer, Staples is a customer on the North American side. They're so profitable. Like if you put it in dollars, and you would be like, "Oh, you're not charging that much," but like because the cost of labor is just so cheap over there, they're hyper profitable.
My fundamental point is that AI is leading to significant economic growth, or at least it seems to be. And there's a lot of people saying that it's not and that it doesn't work and I think we still need to be long AI. And your original question, Asad, was what's my reaction to all these salespeople making all this money? And my reaction is that's freaking awesome.
I
I'm
think that's
happy about
amazing.
it.
My number one advice to salespeople these days is that because there's a lot of people in these markets that then have these like first time leadership opportunities. And found myself giving a lot of reps advice to like, listen, there's moments where you can make money. Salespeople's lives are very similar to venture capitalists. You make money for a few years, market goes down. There are these peak years where you'll make the big money. And don't make a silly career choice in this moment. Like, this is the moment where you can make millions of dollars right now. And a thing we're doing with a lot of our customers, because we have to figure out, like, how do you actually win this fight now? Because you need great people. There's very few of them. How do you win it? And one of the things we've been doing is, can that company be the one that you can make $1 million? If you overachieve, it's the most efficient path to $1 million. So where I've landed is at 300% of plan, can you make $1 million? And at a normal quota, so $1.5 million quota, and you do 300% of that, you make $1 million, which is a faster path to $1 million than a lot of the other companies will offer. But it works out. It's efficient. Like it's not an inefficient spend at that level. And this is the moment when you're a rep, like there's so many of those opportunities to make that sort of money this year, next year, till this thing goes pop. Like you can make that sort of money. So don't make silly choices. Don't be like, well, now I'm going to take this like sales leadership job at like a company that's got no revenue and is just starting, like where I've been an enterprise AE for the last 10 years. It's like, no. Like become a leader later. Go make money right now.
To that point, though, Asa, the question I have is, yes, this is all true on the high end of the market, and that 3x OTE and all of those numbers are great. But what's happening on the early part of the market where you were
early or the
coming out of
bottom? Because who cares about the bottom of the market?
No. I mean this from a career standpoint. Like if you're those high flying enterprise level sellers, they got their start somewhere, right? They got their start as SDRs, as full sales cycle AEs at transactional companies. Those jobs, though, like you're saying, who cares about that? But
No, I'm
that's
saying
where a
who cares
lot of
about
this
shitty companies.
well, not shitty. I'm not talking about shitty companies. I'm just talking about like this consolidation, as we talked about with Amanda, of roles and responsibilities. Well, those folks that are in that top of the funnel or solutions engineer, even they eventually become the enterprise AEs. So where are those crop of enterprise AEs that we're seeing at this high? Where are they going to get their start in their careers in the
I don't
future?
see any situation where companies are not hiring BDRs, SDRs. Like I don't see it. I think companies are hiring a ton of SDRs, ton of BDRs, ton of SMB AEs because you've got a lot of companies that have SMB motions. I think companies are hiring an aggressive amount of technical salespeople. Like I just don't. I think any amount of efficiency gets competed away by just the growth of the market. So let's say if every company is 50% more efficient from a headcount perspective. We had the Replit guy on. They have 300 employees. They're going to do $2 billion this year. That's bananas, right? Like, so maybe by the end of the year, there'll be like 500 or 600 employees, but they're not like 2,000 employees. So they're like, let's say you're 50% more efficient than previous generations. We used to talk about the rate at which the growth of new companies in a market. G2 used to have that data. It was 7% per quarter. That's obviously accelerated. So it's probably like 10% per quarter. So it just like averages out. So I don't see a situation where young people can't find jobs in sales, like in this world. In sales, you can find jobs.
This is the change. Remember, maybe it was a year ago. It was some time when we were all talking, and you were saying you were very worried about underemployment for out of college graduates. Have your fears on that receded? Are you no longer worried?
I think it's just more textured and nuanced, right? Because I think depending on what you are
I don't have any
studying
room. I don't have room for texture or nuance. I want a blanket statement.
Pick one. This is a binary world, Otsid.
Yeah. I don't think it matters if you went to university as a salesperson. I think if you are born with just the capability, like let's be honest, you're born with something that can enable this career path for you. If not, you can't read a book and like practice and get good at this. So it's like It's kind of a God-given skill to some extent that you can nurture and evolve and hone. I think for those people, life is great. I think the challenge is also fine on the engineering side because you've got a lot of people that are going into those universities coming out. Lots of them need to get hired. Now, if you're a literature major,
What if you
or
wanted to be a consultant? What if you wanted to get trained at McKinsey?
those jobs are down. So I was just literally having dinner with a partner at one of the top 3 firms, and those jobs are down. They've hired a lot less of them than in previous years. So I think depending on what your career path is, it's different.
But the other challenge, okay, so maybe you can get that role, but think about what the role is doing. It's a lot of automation. You're a GTM engineer in the Clay world, and you're using Clay and you're using Unify and you're using all these tools.
That's just it's propaganda. Like, no, you're not a go-to-market engineer. You're an SDR. Like, you are doing an SDR's job. Like,
how many cold call conversations is this person having today?
Very
not as
similar
many
to the previous world. Like, I just don't see that much of a difference. Like, at the back end, there's some like fancy AI stuff doing data, enrichment and helping them do more reach outs and do all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, the job of that person is the same job, right? They
So
sit
you
in a
think they
seat.
can hone their sales craft as well as they did? Like, and we think about our
Have you seen these
careers.
new tools? Like even if you look at what they're doing, OneMind, there's a use case for that sort of a thing for role playing. They're not leaning into that use case, but we have another client that we're working with, Avara, and Avara does role playing specifically. That's an enablement use case, and I think Carl Norton and Matt Braley both used it a lot, and it's powerful, man. Like, if you're a new grad joining a company, how much role playing practice would you have gotten before making your first 100 calls in the old world where you had a frontline manager, and now? And how textured is that role playing compared to, like, you had Bob, your frontline manager, who's like one dimensional compared to this thing that is like AI that can give you all the flavors that you're going to be dealing with in the real world. And so I think
Sam already said he doesn't care about texture.
I'm just kidding.
Matt, actually, I asked him what was the one tool at Elise that he was like, I loved it, that I would take with me to another role, and he said Avara without a hesitation.
Avara is great.
Which I understand because it gives you that reps like much, much faster. And cycle
Yeah.
time. So I can see it there. We grew up in a world where I went to Oxford Business School of Sales. Literally, Meltwater sent us there for 6 months. And like,
Oxford had a business school for sales?
under Said. Is that how you pronounce it? Is that what their business school is called? Yeah, they for sales. It was brand new. It was revolutionary, 2009 or 10, I think. And we went through all of like the Myers-Briggs to start with, and you do like never split the difference type of work. That is the old school part of sales that I'm just not sure is carrying forward, that I think we're going to
100%.
miss.
I think you're completely wrong. Like, I think it's the job of a CRO to build a university inside the business. Like, what's your job? Your job
Doesn't
is
matter
to
what
train.
scale. Well,
Like,
I mean, we were
as
talking
you're
about
achieving scale, right? Initially, you're just trying to get to a point where you have the right to build this sort of infrastructure. But once you've hit some sort of escape velocity, so once you're a growth stage company, maybe once you are 20-ish million in revenue today, your goal is now to create a repeatable, predictable, scalable go-to-market motion. The people think go-to-market motions that are repeatable, predictable, scalable are about the winning by design nonsense, right? Like, let's have the measurements and the this and the steps and the this and give it fancy words, and sure, there's a lot of that. But
You
it's
didn't say
really
bow tie.
about
I didn't hear bow
trying to
tie.
develop great people.
He called it
Put the-
nonsense.
I think it's secondary. Like, it's not primary. The primary is you just need an amazing group of people, and you need to develop those people out. And so you're going to hire people, and you're going to have some sort of a university training program that they go through that makes them the best in the world. The lesson at PDC was not that Medic was the reason they won. The lesson at PDC was that in addition to Medic, they were the world's best at developing people out. And so what happened? It was a product that was not differentiated to their two other competitors in market, but they were the winner of the category. It was the first time in the public markets where a company was thriving because of the excellence in go to market. And it wasn't because they knew how to qualify a deal. It just, they had amazing people that knew how to follow steps, but were also able to use that creative freedom from one step to the other to make the right calls and create opportunities and fanfires and close deals. That's the job of a CRO today. So who cares what training programs out? I think it's like you have to contextualize it to what you're trying to build in your company. It's your job.
Yeah, well, I think about Oracle. We used to hire a lot of younger talent out of Oracle because they had such a great sales training program. And then and this is more to Austin, but like MongoDB, and you would think about like the
Mongo is
world-class
amazing.
CROs at that time that built those training programs. Maybe I haven't been as in tune with it. I just don't hear of CROs building that level of
It's that
craft.
like what Mongo was, there's new versions of that that are getting built. Like you have, and it's the same people, by the way. Like the funny thing is, like in go to market, it's very much the same people. A lot of that John McMahon lineage is moving around and doing its thing. And so you have Carlos who did the MongoDB
Carlos, yeah.
stuff. He's at Harness right now. Harness is known to be the next MongoDB. You have people that are at Factory and Cursor and XAI and sorry, XAI/Cursor. So you have that. I think what's going to be interesting is that because in 2021, 2022, we were not remote. Sorry, we were remote. So everybody had just more room to run when they were hiring. And now companies are far more constrained. So they're having to wrestle with like, how do we scale go to market while staying true to like wanting to be in office, wanting to be city specific? That's going to have to shift for them to keep scaling their go to market teams. I think reps have this unique opportunity to make a killing, but there's a lot of people that are still having a tough time finding a job. I think this market is like, if you ever go to a gym in LA, you just rely, like, it's a shocking experience. It's like everyone's so beautiful that you like come away with, like, if you're an unfit person going to the gym in LA, it's not going to be a great experience. I think this market is a little bit like that, where if right now you don't have people trying to kick your door down and hire you, the market is showing you something, and it's the moment to like make some real changes and shifts. Because if this, like, companies cannot hire, and so as long as you're decent, you should have people lining up to try to talk to you. At least that's the market, guys.
That's the market. I think, Sam, your topic is related to this a little bit. In fact, Asad at the beginning of this entire conversation around talent used the terms GTM in sales, and I've always thought of like when I hear sales, I think of like a part of GTM, but also if you're using it as GTM, I think of it in like 2007, you were calling it sales versus GTM. But GTM is many, many different parts. Marketing goes under GTM.
Why don't you
Sales, of course.
contextualize it? What are we talking about?
Well, we've got a tweet from someone pretty well known that goes by initials that made a controversial tweet. What was that, Sam?
It took everything in you not to just do my bit, AJ.
No, I didn't. I wasn't going. I was
just going to do it all.
Yeah,
Another topic.
Listen,
It's
okay, if you want this to be your topic.
We haven't done the three of us in months, and I know we're a little rusty at this, guys. I get it. But Sam, I was setting you up for it.
Well, thank you very much. PG,
Austin
program.
was like, screw that. Get to the point, AJ. Sam, let's hear the tweet.
I don't quite know. Oh, I think I do know what prompted him to write this, but this was yesterday. He wrote, "Is the term sales being replaced by GTM?" This is Paul Graham, founder of YC. Seems kind of bogus, frankly. And I thought it was interesting for a couple of reasons. The first is that go-to-market is at this point, if you haven't heard go-to-market before, there's go-to-market fund, there's go-to-market partners, there's go-to-market OS, there's go-to-market the conference that we'll be hosting. So I found his lack of, and by the way, it generated this whole conversation. And
That's
one part
the biggest compliment anyone has ever given go-to-market partners. Good grief, Sam.
That's a topic for another time. The point is that there's a lot of people in the thread that are like, yeah, salespeople are always trying to change their name, and this is people trying to make themselves sound more important. And it's not that PG said that sales is stupid. But there is an underlying tone of dismissiveness that
Yes.
continues to emanate from him and from technical people in Silicon Valley around the concept of sales. So AJ, we were texting about this before, and AJ's like, "Well, he didn't technically say anything bad about sales." I'm like, "No, but there's a tone. There's a tone there of dismissiveness."
It's like this
And
incel tone. Like incels are just upset that other people were born good looking with personality. This is like that version of it. You're just sad that like some people have this and you as the technical person just don't you're not the full thing. Like there's a missing piece of the game without which you're not undeniable in every area. And that insecurity shows up in a lot of this tonality, I
well,
think.
here's what I wrote. I responded to him. Not that this is like acting like we were engaged in a conversation. We were not. He doesn't know
We
who
were
I
having a
am. It
back
doesn't
and
matter.
forth.
I'm one of 10,000 people in this thread. But I wrote revenue generation is a team sport and involves the interlocking pieces of product sales, marketing, customer success, and ops. GTM doesn't replace sales. It just encompasses or seeks to a wider purview that includes more disciplines and seeks to recognize the reality that money is made across a series of connected steps. So then Pranab Pranab, his handle is PRBSL. GTM necessarily is related to bringing something entirely new to market. You're just misusing the term.
I think
So
his
then
handle just had BS in there, didn't it? There's a bunch of
Well,
BS right here.
I felt like I had a really good little response to Pranab. I said, as one of the principal purveyors of the term and someone that runs a conference called GTM, it's possible but unlikely. Anyway, so the conversation is probably just still related back to what is the value of sales? Do we think go-to-market is BS? Do we think it's just people like the three of us moving the deck chairs or rearranging acronyms so that we can be more important? Or do we think there's a there? Asad, what do you think?
I think it's just fascinating, like how consumer focused. Like I think Martin from A16Z said, seems like a consumer guy talking, and that really was what I got out of it. And I started thinking about OpenAI. And one of the fundamental mistakes OpenAI made, which they're correcting really well right now, was they lean too much into the consumer business, not enough into the B2B business. And if you look at YC, the biggest winners are these consumer companies that have come out of it. Maybe Stripe is a B2B play, but it also has like consumer tendencies in terms of like
SMB. Yeah.
right? Like how it scales. But like there's not a lot of true enterprise software companies that have come out of YC. And it's just fascinating that I think you can be great at so much in tech, and we expect everyone in these roles, like PG's roles, to know everything and to be like so well-rounded. And it's like they're more one-dimensional than we think. And this is a blind spot for them. They don't understand enterprise, hence they don't understand go-to-market, something that has become that started happening 10 years ago. Like when SaaS became a thing, like more than 10 years ago, when SaaS became a thing, we realized NRR is important. When NRR is important, we realized these silos can't work, so we have to combine them. And then the chief revenue officer became a thing. And then when the chief revenue officer became a thing, we realized it's not sales market. We need a name for this whole division. It became go-to-market. This wasn't like something new. This has happened a long time ago. But you can totally miss it.
It's so funny that he's like, this is how long it takes for him to hear about it.
Isn't that crazy? And like he's a billionaire that runs YC, which is the largest accelerator in the world. And like in 2026, he's like, what's this go-to-market thing I'm hearing about these days? It's like, wow, shit. That's fascinating.
AJ, what's your reaction as a tried and true salesman trained in the bowels of meltwater?
The bowels, the deep, deep bowels of the ship. Well, Austin said something that was interesting. He said not a lot of B2B companies have come out of YC. I guess what if I think about companies that have come out of it, and maybe they don't have a big sales team, but you have Stripe, you have Deal, you have Rippling. Rippling has a big sales team. You have Brex and
But
Checker.
these aren't enterprise software.
Yeah, that's also it's a very interesting one. It is, but I would assume that Parker Conrad wouldn't need YC, so maybe
he needed a group of people to align with him after his fight with A16Z.
Yeah, that's true. He needed a little.
He went in the second time, but again, all the companies you've mentioned are not enterprise-focused software companies. And that's what's
Deal
missing. That's what
Deal is
Deal
not
is-
enterprise
Deal is.
focused, but it is a B2B play.
Yeah.
B2B,
I
but
think,
by PLG.
well, to the question you just asked, Sam, I think about when we had Katie Bullard on, I remember from the conversation if she's actually worked in sales, but when I think of go-to-market builders, like true GTM builders, Katie is a true GTM builder. And so you just like bring it up a level and you're really talking about the business model, the unit economics, do all of the pieces in this pendulum swing together in a way that creates harmony and creates a great business. And I think like even companies, GitHub's a good example. I years ago had a chance to sit down with the former CRO of GitHub, and he joined when the company was around 20 million in revenue. And he said when he joined that the CEO, technical co-founder and CEO, didn't even want to meet with him. They're like, how are you going to hire a CRO without ever even meeting the CRO? And that's how little he thought of sales. And what he had said, which is true, is you have this ability to take a $20 million business, Snowflake, kind of a similar situation, and up level it in a big, big way by packaging it at the enterprise, packaging it in B2B. Real companies, regardless of how they get their start, if you don't think Stripe is a B2B company, or Deal, well, they all have real enterprise sales teams today. And that's how they've actually been able to grow and continue their 30, 40% growth year over year when you're already well scaled beyond $100 million.
I'm not saying they're not B2B. I'm saying that they're more SMB and PLG, and maybe now they have like enterprise motions, but they're not like built the way that like a harness is built. Like harnesses as a business is only for the end. Like Mongo was built for the enterprise. So there's like
yeah.
enterprise motion that requires like a go-to-market build that happens there, and there's a sophistication there and an appreciation for enterprise. Like any founder that sells into enterprise, especially second-time founders, they understand that the complexities go to market. When you're looking at these companies right now that are getting built, your Decadrons, your Sierras, etc., like why is Sierra so cool? It's because you have a technical person who has an appreciation for what it takes to work with the enterprise. And it's very, very difficult to work with the enterprise. You need to know how to open those doors. You need to know how to help them digest the technology. You need to know how to expand within those organizations. Like Sierra right now has gone from a use case that is support to using that almost as a beachhead to be a much broader enterprise solution for these organizations. Like you can see them now broadening out. That sort of sophistication in a founder, that's the founder a go-to-market person wants to work for. I have a question for you. Do you think that it's possible to be a great CRO now without having started in sales? Like you said Katie hadn't done sales, but she'd done everything else. Like in this future, like is that going to happen more and more or less and less?
Well, in your future of like the MongoDBs and the Carlos, I think that the answer is no. You have to have worked in sales. I think you absolutely have had to have that DNA and like ingrained.
I think you have to be the best salesperson to be the best CRO.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, I think once you reach the CRO level, you probably are the best salesperson. But when you say best salesperson, you mean like as an individual contributor, you were crushing it and you were at the very top of the leaderboard?
I mean that in that company, if there's a meeting that has to be won and a person has to be in that meeting who can help win it, that CRO is going to be a difference maker in that meeting. And that means at some point in their career, they were very, very good at sales. I don't believe that people, like there's this like style of CRO that's like very like quiet and subdued and not very like, you couldn't have imagined them as a world-class salesperson. I just don't see that working so well.
Okay, I actually have a good data point on this. So Ryan Milligan, our CRO, has never worked in sales. He's never worked in sales there. We just hired our VP of strategic sales, Max Bergen, who was my like right-hand lieutenant at Trendkite and worked with me at Meltwater as well. And it's really interesting to have those two as a dynamic because I know Max really well, but it's also clear that he has had and carried a bag throughout his career, where Ryan, fantastic CRO, but there's definitely times where that like sales strategy of a deal is just different,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Like you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
just
yeah.
like tell when
Yeah.
you zoom into that level, but when you go up at altitude, Ryan's fantastic. And I trust him to jump on calls. I mean, he's running the account management team, so he's also on customer conversations as well. And he has the urgency to do it, but I do notice a difference in like how they sell and what that
There's an
actually means.
instinct. There's an instinct
Yeah.
that develops that is just like, it's hard to be academic about it.
I don't know.
It's the same way as when Jotro like made a post recently about some company. I think it was Airtable. And like at the end of the post was basically that, I'm paraphrasing aggressively here, but the idea was
This is going to be great. Bated
the
breath
idea
on my
was
chair.
that if Airtable had worked with Winning by Design, they would have had a different outcome, right? And I would argue that's not the case.
Oh my God. That has to
That's
be,
hilarious.
that has
That's
to be
not
nothing
true.
close to what he said.
That's
you can read the post.
sarcastic.
Like, go read the
It's-
post. It was very close to that. Like, it was like, if for these SaaS companies, like that to not have this sort of mundane outcome, like they have to have this revenue factory with these like growth loops, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, I don't think a company that has lost product market fit as aggressively as that would have had any better outcome if they had a better mechanical infrastructure and go to market. Like, I think
Well,
that
they did let go of like 95% of their CS team a few years ago. Even when they were on like their high growth, they let go of like 200 people in one fell swoop. That was just CS, and they kept 4 people. So there is something to like that. They definitely didn't. They definitely had a change in how they were thinking about their growth teams and CS in particular.
Go to market cannot make up for product market fit. I think if you have like equal product market fit to 2 other companies in a category, go to market can be a difference maker, like for PTC. But I don't think go to market can be the difference between a 3x and a 6x multiple. If you don't have product market fit, like that's not what it does. Like, it's like saying that by working with a trainer, you're going to get fit. No, unless you work out and eat better, you're not going to get fit. Like, unless your product has fit in market, you're not going to be able to have the sort of revenue growth and retention that justifies that multiple. Like, great people is not going to make a difference. Better systems is not going to make that difference.
So the end of the day, you firmly believe to have a great outcome as an enterprise company, you have to have a B2B sales team, go-to-market team.
1,000,000%.
Yeah, like it's impossible.
Everybody needs a sales team. You need a sales team. Unless even Google has a sales team. The greatest consumer product of all time has a big sales team.
Impossible not to. I think this is the difference between first and second time founders. Is second time founders realize that building a generational company is a combination of a bunch of things that has to go really well. The first thing you have to do is build a great product. The second thing you have to do is build a great go-to-market team. The least important, but still extremely important, is your G&A function. But it's like, that's the order of priority. Like, build a world-class product, then build a world-class go-to-market team that can give you the sort of acceleration and retention you need, and then have a good administrative arm and leg of the business to like keep things moving forward.
I got really good advice from our one of my investors. This was a few years ago when we were going through some challenges in 23 and doing the riff thing that all SaaS companies were doing. But it was just pretty simple and straightforward to the point. What you just said, Asad, is that a company of builders and sellers. That's it. And that's like figure out who the builders and sellers are, and then make sure you don't have the fat.
I left GLG and I had these weird, because GLG was so successful that it had weird job titles. And so I was head of research management for a long time. What is research management? It was really customer success, but we didn't know that. We didn't have the words for it. And I got into true software companies. And I'm like, exactly what you said, AJ. I'm like, oh, I get it. You're either building it or selling it. Everybody else is incidental. I don't know how to build it. I guess I'm going to sell it. And
maybe that's PG's point. Maybe that's just like the point, I guess, is that they're builders over there, and builders always have an ego about who they are, and like the sellers and slinging software should be easy. You don't need fancy titles for it. I don't know.
I have a
It, it,
question, and it's going to relate to AJ's talking point, but it's for Asad. So, Asad, you're working with all these companies that are. You said you've talked to a founder that's gone from 2 to 100 in a year. There was a period in 2024 or maybe last year when Bessemer came out with Supernova, Shooting Star, all these new benchmarks.
yeah.
Do you still? Is that true? That like yes, there's a class of companies. The enterprises have not expended. They're not. They haven't burned through their AI transformation budget. There's open budget available for companies, and companies all the time that are being started right now can go from 1 to 10 to 100 in 24 months, and that's a regular trajectory.
I think there's many examples, more than I think any one of us would have guessed that there would be, of companies that have had this sort of astronomical acceleration. And you see it like up till quite a stage, right? Like you see certain companies that are maintaining this pretty crazy growth up to 500 million in revenue. But so it's more than even I would have thought that would have been possible. At the same time, it's undeniable that the market is becoming a little bit trickier and tougher. So if you are a pure play enterprise AI company, so you're selling Sierra is a good example, your revenue acceleration cannot be like a Lovable and a Replit. It by nature cannot, because the enterprise is slower to buy, harder to sell into, etc. So what astronomical growth looks like for a Sierra or a Decagon is different to a Replit. And that doesn't mean that they are less valuable or worse companies. It's just they're playing different games. Decagon's last valuation was 125 times ARR. And so the market does not view them as like lesser than. But depending on where you are selling, there's just by the nature of how those companies buy a different level of what good looks like, number one. Number two, enterprise buyers they are spending a lot, and there are more questions today around ROI, which is why you have seen this huge uptake in the FDE role and companies leveraging it to try to help these companies get an ROI, because they're not set up themselves to figure it out, and AI is very complicated. The intelligence evolves very quickly. It's extremely jagged in its capabilities, and so to get ROI is very complicated, and so you do need hand-holding. And you can see the uptake of the FDE model is basically proof of how difficult it is to work with the enterprise and get them the ROI. That said, I think even though there's more questions around ROI and there's maybe a little bit more diligence companies are doing today than before, enterprises are still think of this as a massive threat and a massive opportunity at the same time. And those questions are not going to result in less spend, because what everyone forgets is every 4 to 8 weeks we have new capabilities. And so if you're an enterprise, are you going to decide to stop leaning into AI today when the AI is better than it was 6 months ago because the spend of 6 months ago didn't give you an ROI? You're not. And so as long as it keeps improving, they'll keep spending.
AJ, it's your turn. Good answer, Asad.
My turn. I've got 2 topics. Before I do want to make one statement that I just looked this up. Rippling was part of YC, and Parker Conrad was already a very established founder. We already knew this. Having previously founded Zenefits, which was YC itself in winter of 13, Rippling wasn't the typical unknown founder going through YC's story, but YC officially considers Rippling a winter 17 company. There you go. So,
I know. I looked it up. You're right.
oh well, I don't always know. My audience doesn't know if I'm right. Sam, you always know I'm right. So I've got 2. They're both kind of small, but I'll start with the we're working on a lot of benchmarking data, and we're getting Q2 numbers. And I think the last episode I stated something pretty, I don't know if controversial, but maybe surprising, which was 76% of AEs hit their quota in the first half of 26. That is true. That was very specific to a specific set of AEs in a quarterly cadence. But we looked at some of the numbers, and the first half of this year quota attainment is almost identical to the first half of last year. So 2025 and 2026 for annual quotas, those numbers are 58% this year are hitting their annual targets the first half, and versus 55% last year. And that's annual plans. But there's really interesting is that the standard deviation.
Does that mean that halfway into the year they've hit the annual number?
Halfway into the year, no, because what we do is we split that quota up.
They're on track
currently
to hit their
tracking to 55 to 58%. But the second half of the year for annual quotas is typically when you actually similar to like a quarterly quota where the last 2 weeks of a quarter, you're selling 60% of the business. So I would expect those numbers to jump quite a bit. Yeah. But the interesting thing is that the standard deviation is way higher this year, meaning that the winners are going to be winning more right now. So if you were thinking about it as a barbell curve, there are a lot more people at the bottom end of attainment and at the top end of attainment, and not nearly as many people in the middle. So we're seeing a lot more losers, a lot more winners. This kind of matches what you're saying, what you said, Asad, as well.
AJ, is it 58%, meaning of 100 people, 58 of them are on track? Or is it of 100 people and their quota, let's say that's $1 billion, in a way, my point is, are the overperformers overperforming?
Yeah,
and therefore,
it's the latter.
Total dollar quota attainment's 58%, even though individually it might be only 30% of people that are actually putting up those numbers.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly right, Sam, which is the point on the standard deviation. So it's more like a barbell than it is a bell curve at this point in time.
That's really interesting because we see this now in organizations. There are reps that are setting quotas has become really difficult. And there's actually a pretty big disconnect right now in market, which is there's one group of people, which is kind of the older PTC lineage people that are saying even today the right quota number is 1.5-ish million. Having people achieve a lot more than that is a sign of inefficiency and you're leaving money on the table, is this argument that they make. The other side of the argument, which is kind of what Benchmark and their people are making, is that this quota capacity type of analysis that we do, we have to start from a first principles based perspective. When buyers think what you sell is magic, you're not generating demand. You are trying to harness as much momentum out of this excitement and interest as humanly possible. And quota attainment in that environment is going to look very different. Hence, quotas would look very different. And you do see that some AI companies, their reps making $5-10 million attainments in a year. And so that company might have 10 reps and $100 million target, but 2 of those reps might have done half that entire number.
Yeah. So, because I was worried that Guy Rubin would be disproved, because he always talks about a 28% quota attainment rate, but I think that's the number of sellers. 28% of sellers are achieving quota.
Were you really worried that he was going to be disproven? I think you secretly wanted that.
No, a little bit.
I think I think he looks at the market the wrong way, and his number is not so the data is helpful if you can do something with it. What are you supposed to do with that 28 number?
Oh, he has a much deeper benchmarking report in his defense. He has very prescriptive strategies, and it is about...
No, I've read his whole thing. It all comes back down to the winning by design style of better systems, better this.
Targeting and segmentation, I think, is what he does.
Great. And I think the argument I'm making is that this market, while being the technology market, there's many different games being played now, and you just have to measure them very differently. So if you're an AI company, you're going to, in this sort of analysis that AJ, you're doing as well, you're going to get bucketed into the same group as the SaaS companies. And so that's why you have these low attainments. I think Airtable's average quota attainment, I think less than 20% of reps were making target at Airtable. And I think Airtable itself, attainment against revenue goals was very low. If you're an AI company, it's very different. And so you have to kind of break these things apart now and look at them very, very differently. Otherwise, they'll muddy the number and you won't know what to do with it. If you're an AI company, you should only compare yourself to other AI companies and see like what's happening there and what's the game. Whereas if you're a SaaS company still trying to work through a transition, you have to compare yourself to other SaaS companies. Otherwise, the world won't make sense to you.
I think I think that is exactly right. Also, it goes back to your point around talent and people hiring like these top performers to be able to compete at the level in the industry that they're competing at. I just sent you guys a text that was the direct stats that Graham had sent me just to, share some of level of what we're actually seeing with these numbers. And the question I have then is that, okay, if you have like 4 performers that are way at the top and then the other 4 at the bottom, you're probably going to get rid of the 4 at the bottom. You're raising quotas, right? You're going to raise because your capacity, you're letting go of those 4 and you have 4 that are way outperforming. So you're going to raise quotas, but then you're bringing people in. And so the ramp will most likely be a lot longer, I would think, with getting into these type of sales teams, right?
I just don't think you can do much with what your outlier performers are doing. Like, what are you supposed to do with that? Like, your quota can't be $10 million. Like, that's no rep is going to sign up for that. And so I think you could say maybe your quota is $2.5 million or $3 million, and you can show like real attainment. Like, I just had this conversation with an early stage founder. Founder-led sales got him to $6 million in ARR. That's fantastic. $6 million.
Really,
one young kid selling $500,000 average deal sizes into big banks. This guy is like, I think 23 years old.
In your word, he's a gangster.
Gangster, like pure gangster.
Knew
right?
You were going to say it. Called it.
Biggest nerd, like just pure amazing gangster, figured this out. Great. He's hired 1 rep, and that rep is going to do some good numbers this year, is trending well. So now they need to hire a bunch more reps. And so they set up the quota to be $3 million. And I was like, no one's going to sign up for this.
Each person is supposed to generate $3 million in new business.
And I was like, you can't do that. You just can't do it. He's like, but look, I did 6 and my one guy is trending so well. And it's like, dude, you need like to sell this story to a rep. You need 10 AEs to be doing crazy numbers for you to say, listen, in our company, this is what's real. But if you don't have that, then you have to start with this conservative like 1.5 and take the hit. Like, if it ended up being too conservative, so what? Like, you had reps that you paid a little bit more money to. Like, what's so bad about that?
You said conservative 1.5, but what's the OTE for each of these reps?
400,000.
Okay, so you still have a 4 to 1 quota to OTE ratio.
3 point something to 1. Yeah, that's what I'm saying that he should be doing. They wanted to do 6 to 1, basically.
No, I know, that's crazy. Yeah, that's not going to work.
So there's that. The part of the market that is like getting kicked in the face left, right, and center is private equity. So private equity companies have traditionally never given equity to ICs in sales. And they have kind of gotten by with that for quite a long time. Any company that's under Thoma Bravo's portfolio right now, or one of these Francisco partners, etc., they are having a really tough time with retention and with hiring because no one wants to work. Like, it's like you have a stool with 3 legs competing against a stool with 2 legs, and no one wants to sit on that silly stool right now. That is the situation. Yeah.
I feel like a natural point. We can keep talking about HubSpot, AJ, if you like.
Well, that's a smaller one. I've just done, HubSpot came out with their earnings and they beat the market across all of their metrics. They did revise down for the end of the year and their stock dropped 20%. And I just think it's interesting in this like SaaS apocalypse that we're talking about. And this is, I'm not a pundit for the market whatsoever. There's funds and firms like Citadel that have been shorting SaaS and long AI. And so there's a big part of just the algorithm is just going to continue to push down stocks like HubSpot. I just do find it fascinating when you dive into the numbers. They aren't hitting as many new logos as they're going to project for the year, but their expansion is very well outperforming what they thought they were going to do and beating the market. And it's interesting just to see this and watch it from the outside. Of course, I work closely with HubSpot on a lot of levels, but even just from where the numbers are, it just continues to be this like nightmarish situation. It's rebounded a little bit, but
some markets, a $10 billion company. I mean, that's That
It's
is
going to do
wild.
4 billion. It's going to do 4 billion in revenue this year and has $1.5 billion in cash.
Yeah, but they only
Announced-
had 45 million in profit last year on $3 billion of revenue. And this company is just not that impressive.
I don't know if that's true. They have $1 billion.
Well, so if
they
they
have-
have $1.5 billion in cash, that you can take that away from the 10 billion market cap. So they're worth $8.5 billion for 4 billion in revenue. That is punitive.
Yeah.
So are you a buyer of the stock?
I'm buyer. I did buy
Oh
again.
my God, AJ, there's so many better places to put money.
Asad, yeah. Well, Asad
why
wanted
would you-
me to get in on a deal of Vanta going public for this year,
Oh,
right?
on Polymarket, there was like a thing that you could get like, I think twice your money betting against Vantage going public this year. I was like, that's the easiest money you can make in the world.
That was back in April. And
Yeah.
and
And you would have
we
made
should've
that
done
money.
it. Yeah, did you do it?
No, I didn't. But I put my money in CrowdStrike and I'm up 100% on that so far.
Look at
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
I just don't think that HubSpot is like, HubSpot's a really good example of a company in the SaaS era that's just going to have a really tough time with the transition. I think it was the Benchmark, Eric from Benchmark, that was saying that the tough thing about, he said this thing that was really interesting, kind of aligns with the conversation we had last week. He's like, every day that you are hitting your revenue targets as a SaaS company, you're destroying enterprise equity value. And he's like, that's the problem that a SaaS company has to deal with, is like you're programmed to like hit your number, do this stuff. He's like, but you have to almost burn it down and do something
Yeah.
different. And the bigger you are, the harder it is to burn down. He said this other thing. He's like, most SaaS companies are running their business from 9 to 5, and then from 5 to 8, they're trying to do AI. And he's like, you kind of have to do it the other way. It's like, it's just interesting. I think that's the challenge. And HubSpot has scale, which is the thing that makes it hard to make that transition. So their product, when you use it, similar to Salesforce, is not very exciting. And how are they going to compete?
Well, stay tuned, my friends, because in a future episode, we'll talk about how QuotaPath burned it all down and did a restart.
That's going
I
to be
like-
exciting.
It's coming. It's gonna happen.
We support you, AJ.
As my largest investment ever in a private company.
Yeah,
I really hope you think through
investors
that.
right now. I'm telling them for the first time that
I
it's
think,
all.
to the point, Asad, and I'm a smaller investor than Asad, but we're both investors. And I think it's a perfect articulation of some of the challenge that like Stebbings and Lemkin, all these VCs are talking about, which is, it's not that we're not going to make money on the investment. We absolutely will. It is the opportunity cost of being in, and I'm a bull on QuotaPath, just to be clear. No, this is not me being dismissive, but it's like, you could be in SpaceX or you could be in QuotaPath, and it's a challenge. It is a challenge for investors, and it's a challenge for founders, because as founders, you're hearing that your company isn't cool, which is why, you know what? It's got to be for the love of the game. You got to build a great business and be in love with your business and have fun doing it. Because if you're white knuckling it and, you're pushing yourself and it's 996 and you're going all out and you're not seeing those results, I feel like that's part of the Airtable story, which Manny was talking about, is founder fatigue.
Good news is I'm both an investor in QuotaPath and SpaceX. So you just tick the
there you
way.
go.
So you're
living the
good. You're
good life.
diversified.
He's hedged. I think the founder fatigue one is a really big part of this, because the other side of the argument is, be a cockroach. Like, who gives a shit what your evaluation is if you're not raising money, right? So that's the only time it really matters, is when you're in a public company or when you're raising money. But NVIDIA didn't have AI for 20 plus years of their journey, or even more than 20 years of their journey. Like, companies have second phases. They find new things to do. Like, the game can be long, and it can be extremely, you can play a very different game down the line than you're playing right now. But if you get exhausted, then that's when you
that's where I was going. You gotta fall. That's where I'm at actually right now, which is what I'm falling back in love with my business after a long time of sort of being somewhat indifferent to it. And if you have that energy and you like your life, just like you with STA Asad, and I think, AJ, you're enjoying QuotaPath. Like, if you're having fun, we can do it for a long time, as long as we don't run out of money.
Isn't it strange how much it's like a real relationship with like your life partner? Like, if you look at these like marriages and companionships, like, you kind of have to fall in love with each other like 5 different times over a lifetime, right? And because you keep changing as people and you have to like find new ways to like new phases of your relationship. And like, I think having a business, founding a business, running a business, is very similar to that, strangely.
No, I completely agree with you. And I would say to the point of outcomes and exits as a parting thought before we let everybody go, but nobody should love your business more than you. So if you don't love your business and you're the founder, don't expect some great outcome because you got to be the most in love. Like I just think it's unrealistic to be like, I think this is a piece of shit, but here you take it.
Yeah. And if you don't believe it, like it'll come across. So if you're not getting the best multiples, there's probably a little bit of that that's coming across in the pitch as well.
Well, this was a fun episode, everybody. We're going to be live in GTM. Asad and AJ are going to be presenting comp data to Pavilion Gold, which is going to be awesome. And they're going to get to join us at a very special dinner. You guys are going to be blown away. So we're going to have a great time in person. But until then, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening, everybody.